As long as I was going after the crooks that didn't have badges, I was everybody's hero.
Let me tell you a Byron Sage story. Then we'll move on to another topic.
I'd love to hear that.
It's actually a Byron Sage, Gary Richardson story. When I got arrested, I had my secretary call Gary Richardson. Just happened to get him on the phone. He was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Friend of mine, we had tried cases together. He had just left the U.S. Attorney's Office. Reagan had appointed him to be the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Oklahoma. And he had served there for 4 or 5, 6 years, had prosecuted a lot of public officials. My secretary calls Gary. Gary immediately left for the airport. This was before 9/11, so they could still hold the door for him at the airplane. He was the last person on the plane. It was 5 minutes late taking off. They held it for Gary. He gets here to Waco. He's at my arraignment 4 hours later, Walter Smith's court, down on Franklin Avenue here in Waco. And by the time I'm released, Gary and I head back to the DA's office. The damn FBI is still there, going through every piece of paper, searching everything. They've already been to my house and tore everything apart, dug up our flower beds, raked the insulation in the attic, everything. So Gary and I come walking in, and there's big old Byron Sage standing there. And Gary goes, "Are you in charge here?" Sage goes, "Yes, I am." Gary says, "Well, I just want to tell you, I was U.S. Attorney in Oklahoma for so many years, and I've prosecuted this many public officials, and we never put on a show arrest like you guys did today. We just call the lawyer and have them turn themselves in." And Gary was just really ragging on him. And Byron puts his hand up and interrupts him and says, "Mr. Richardson, I am not going to get into a battle of wits with you." And Gary goes, "Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I wouldn't fight an unarmed man."
Wow.
Yeah. And then that was in 1986. Then it was 1991 that Gary is trying the Below case with me. And we're here in Waco, and the only witness that Below called to be a character witness against me was federal judge Walter Smith. And Gary Richardson cross-examined Walter. An incredible cross. Ate him up. Made him look like a piece of crap. They had to scrape him off of that witness stand with a spatula. And anybody that's interested, that cross-examination is on vicfazell.com. Go read it. So anyway, then the Davidian fire happens. Then the criminal charges. Then it's in Walter Smith's court. They're looking at indicting all you guys. Your mom calls Gary Richardson, hires Gary. Gary calls me. He says, "If I go represent Thibodeau, you want to help me?" I said, "Sure. I wish I had been up there to represent David and all of them." It was my chance to maybe redeem myself. So Gary signed on to represent you. And then we see the indictments start coming down. Every little old gray-headed lady out there gets indicted. Yeah. They're almost ready to indict some of the kids, except for David Thibodeau. You never got indicted. No. Now, personally, I will always believe it's because Walter Smith just couldn't stand the idea of Gary Richardson in his courtroom again. Because they were indicting some of those little old ladies that had never touched a gun, you know? But David Thibodeau didn't get indicted.
Yeah.
Now, I do know that you have a story about Bill Johnston on that. Bill Johnston was the U.S. attorney who was in charge of, like, prosecuting some of you guys. Mm-hmm. And then later ends up getting prosecuted himself for tampering with evidence or something like that.
Well, the thing about Bill that he did, which, you know, I have some respect for, actually, is he found out about the pyrotechnic devices. The FBI had claimed for years there were none. And he was trying to go up the chain of command and saying, you know, this is important. You have to tell Janet Reno about this. And no, they wouldn't do it. So he went, my understanding is, he went behind everyone's back and went directly to Reno and said, "We got these pyrotechnic devices. The FBI have claimed that that weren't used. And they're in the evidence locker." So, you know, apparently retribution, they went after him after that. Personally, I don't care.
The problem was,
being
though,
in the trials, I wasn't a big fan of Bill Johnston.
he had destroyed some notes he had made that could have incriminated him. That's what they finally caught him on.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. See, I just don't know. As far as I was concerned, he was attacking everyone that I cared about and was a member of the other side, that other team. But how it worked out, I ended up in a social event where Bill was at here in Waco many years ago. And he said, David Thibodeau. And I said, Bill Johnston. Just like that. And he said, I got a story for you. I said, okay, I'll listen. Why not? I'm here. And I'm having a very surreal experience because you're here. And he sat down. He told me the reason I wasn't indicted was because I reminded him of his brother who had long hair. And his brother was a kind of a peacenik. Sounds like a great guy, actually. Peacenik, peace-loving kind of person with the long hair and the hippie vibe, if you will. And he said, I told them that we should not prosecute Thibodeau because we're never going to get a conviction against this hippie-looking guy. It just wouldn't happen. That's what he said that the reason I wasn't indicted. Now, it depends on who you talk to. My mother, of course, thinks that she was down here and she was on Oprah. At the time, the place started to burn and she dropped the phone and Oprah's like, Belinda. So, Mom did. I wish you would have. I wanted to walk away from this not being a name. I was hoping I could kind of slip through the pages of history incognito. But, once Ma got to town, that wasn't going to happen. She took on everyone. She was a fighter.
Yeah.
That she did an amazing job as well.
She did.
I think she created a lot of goodwill with people. And
she did.
I think a lot of people didn't want to see me get indicted. All these factors worked on my behalf.
Yeah.
So
Thing is, though, a lot of people didn't want to see a lot of the little old ladies get indicted either.
Yeah.
They didn't want to see these crippled old men get indicted.
The government does not care, Vic.
They don't care. They don't care. And you've told me that story before about Bill, and I'm giving you my personal opinion of Bill. Bill and I have a history. It goes way back. And my personal opinion is that Bill's just a pathological liar. If he's telling you the truth, you just flip a coin and, you got a good chance of telling right there, 50-50, if he's telling the truth or not. But maybe, but I doubt it. Just because Bill said it.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you didn't get indicted. Yeah. I'm glad you didn't have to go through a federal trial because
me too.
That's pretty terrible. I've been through one.
I was there watching my friends during the trial, and it was just a terrible experience because you're not allowed to say anything, and every day you just see so much injustice. It makes you sick to your stomach. It makes you physically ill. Like I said, I was no fan of Bill Johnston from watching the trial, but I am glad that he at least talked about the pyrotechnic devices being a real thing.
That's true.
It was someone on the other side needed to bring that out. That made it even more real. And to this day, you can say what the government, it's always been the people inside set the fire. I'm sorry. I didn't see anyone. Nobody inside set a fire. And they have 6 or 7 pyrotechnic devices that were recovered. I'm sorry. Why?
I'm quoted in the Houston Chronicle 3 or 4 days before the fire saying the government's going to kill them all. You mark my word. That way they won't have to answer any questions later. They can just bury their mistakes.
Yeah.
And I said, I've dealt with these people. I can tell what they're doing at the gate. And by then I'd already had the message about the bullet with my name on it.
Yeah.
So, I predicted, and it's in the Houston Chronicle, that they were going to do that. Yeah. Hey, let's talk a little about, we were talking at lunch about David's music. You played music with David outside of the Davidian home after you moved to Waco. Tell us about that.
There was a period of time, when we first had come here, David he would hang out at this bar called Q-Stick.
Q-Stick.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember 77. I think it's off 77.
Yeah, out in the Belmead area.
Yeah, it's a roadhouse, something roadhouse.
Yeah.
A great place though, really nice. And David built a stage in there. He became friends with the owner, Randy, and he built a stage, and they decided to, have like a talent night, or David called it Boo Night, where anyone can get up and try their hat at, doing something live in front of an audience and, get booed or be praised, whatever the audience felt like doing. And a lot of the local bands would come, and they would come and do a set. He was a really nice guy, that bar owner. Knew his whole family. And they were just great people. It's the people that I've met here on the outside, outside of, the Davidian thing. They've all been great. We had friends. One of the drummers used to come out to Mount Carmel, and he'd bring his guns and shoot with us at the firing range, and, and have a cookout, that kind of thing. Maybe that's not something you really do. So the culture down here, I just found very interesting. It's, people in other bands would come and shoot their guns with you.
Yeah.
It's nice. It was, in a lot of places in America, that's demonized, that kind of thing. And it's a part of American culture. It's just who we are. Second Amendment. It's all very important. And I don't know.
But you were playing with David some at the Q Stick.
Yeah, when he did Boo Night, we would play. We would get up and do our set where we'd just jam, about 20 minutes, that kind of thing, and then watch some of the other bands. But it was a lot of fun.
Here's the dots I'm trying to connect. The ATF attacks your place. They attack the Davidian home. Yeah. And I've made the point on this podcast on numerous occasions that if they had just wanted to arrest David, they could have done it. Because we know that he played music out in the community. We know that he went jogging by himself a lot, or running rather.
Yeah.
How soon to the attack was it that you remember playing out at the Q Stick? Had y'all quit way before the attack, or?
Yeah, it was a few months.
Okay.
I can't remember what happened. It was just I think David went in another direction. We didn't play there.
All right.
Boo Night ended, kind of thing. Yeah.
At lunch, you mentioned to me that y'all had played somewhere like maybe 9 days before.
No, what happened there is we knew, that there were people that were set up in the house across the street and that they were watching us. It was pretty apparent. They didn't do a good job of hiding it. And of course they came and they got to know David, and, Robert Rodriguez, the undercover guy, was hanging out with David, spending a lot of time with David. And there was a documentary we came across that showed that the ATF, two of the guys went with David a few miles down the road to a gun range here in Axtell, and shot with him at the gun range 9 days before the siege.
So 2 ATF guys were at the firing range shooting with David.
Yeah.
So they trusted him enough to be there, and he had a gun.
Exactly.
And they could have arrested him there if they'd have wanted to.
And what's interesting, when you read the Dallas Morning News, there's all kinds of reports in the paper at the time where they're talking to some of the personnel that were on the scene. And, I think Rodriguez especially said, when he exited the building on the last day, he thought he was going to be shot in the back. Now, that's true, but he made it sound like every time he exited the building, he felt that any time he could be shot in the back. And I'm sure if you're an undercover guy, that's always in the back of your mind. But that guy was friendly with us. We were friendly with him. Other than early on, I didn't see fear in his eyes when he was coming over. Early on, yeah. But I think once he got to know us, and especially David would give him studies quite a bit, I didn't see that fear. I think that dissipated. So I think it was unfair for him to say that every time he felt like he was going to be shot. That's not true. And, we were nothing but good to him. And David was nothing but good. David gave him every opportunity to say, listen, tell your superiors, the people that are in charge of this, that you've seen nothing illegal here. And that was true at the point. He had not seen anything illegal. He brought in an illegal weapon and gave it to David. David went through it, took it apart so quickly that it shocked him. And he was like, oh my God, and said, hey, look at this. The the pin here is seared, which makes this full auto. This is an illegal firearm. Why would you even bring this into my house?
Oh my God.
And so I bought that at a gun show. He goes, no, you didn't. You didn't buy this at a gun show. This has been, manufactured. That's illegal. You need to get that out of here. So that was the kind of thing that went on. They just, I don't know. It was obviously they were trying to entrap David, but he was always a step ahead of them.
Were you ever out there when representatives from the sheriff's office or from my office or from CPS would come out and visit?
I recall them coming out once, but I don't believe I talked to anyone.
Okay.
I remember seeing Joy Sparks. I know she was in charge at some point, but they didn't ask me any questions. I wasn't directly involved in that.
And Jack,
but I know that was happening.
Jack and Larry Lynch. They were comfortable out there. I had an investigator that worked for me named J.L. Crawford. Yeah. He lived in Lacey Lakeview. Yeah. So it was really quick for him to get over there from home. And I told him, and this was when all the rumors about child abuse were circulating. Mm-hmm. I told him, just drop in on him anytime. And he did several times. Never saw any evidence of anything bad going on. Matter of fact, they'd invite him in for ice cream. They'd always scoop him up some ice cream when he was there. Yeah. And he always had good things to say. Yeah. The time that you were there, did you ever see, in your opinion, any evidence of child abuse?
No, not at all. I saw some parents spank their children, but it was always done, in a very controlled environment. This is why you're getting it was never out of anger. In other words, it was always as a discipline. Nothing I would consider abuse, because I would have been shocked by that. And these kids went to town with their parents,
right?
Quite often. They were very well behaved. I don't think anyone suspected abuse that had met the kids, other than some of the people that had left, like Mark Bro, and were making all those allegations.
It was usually allegations from people who had left, or from some of the, I think they're in California, who wanted the land.
Yeah. Oh, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, they wanted the land.
In all fairness, there's a woman named Dana Okinawa. She was one of David's wives, and she left with 2 sons from David, and they're alive. She's working on a book, and she claims that she left because she didn't want to spank her kids, that she felt that spanking was too severe of a punishment. She couldn't live with it anymore. And that David was insisting, because of scripture, that spare the rod, spoil the child. And she just wasn't comfortable with that anymore and left the group. So, there was a scriptural pressure for people to discipline their kids, and some people didn't want them, they left. And, there were people that had left. And the point is, you were allowed to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't one of those things
it sounds like
where
you couldn't
leave.
get out. That just isn't true. We have examples of people that have left. So, that's where I don't spank my kids. I could never bring myself to spank my kids. Just, but you can't say that it's not a part of discipline in the history of the United States.
Yeah, really.
And, who
David,
knows?
While I was DA, the CPS went out to the Davidian home one time with a school bus. And they loaded every kid up on that school bus and brought them in because of these allegations coming out of, I think it was California, and brought them all into town and interviewed them all separately. And their report was, these kids do not act like children that have been abused. Yeah. Not at all. Now, the only other thing that I've heard is allegations about David himself with some of the younger girls. But I don't know anything about that either.
Well, he definitely had a lot of wives. He had a lot of children, that's for sure. And I wrote about this in my book. The youngest that I could find was Michelle. And of course, that's when I came onto the scene, Michelle she had Serenity, who was 3 at the time. And I always considered Michelle to be a peer of mine. I was 23, but she acted like I dated a lot of girls in Hollywood that acted far more immature than Michelle did. Michelle acted like a mom, like a woman, like a serious person. And so it wasn't until I, did research for the book that I realized how young she was when she had Serenity. So when I knew her, she was 17, but it's nothing that I even considered or talked to her about. She just seemed like an equal to me. She didn't seem like a young girl. But when I was doing research for the book, I found out that conception of Serenity would have had to have been around 14. Well,
Wow.
13, because she had Serenity at 14. So, I had to face all that. Much later, I had to face the fact that technically, Koresh is guilty of one or two things, as I say in the book. It's like a double Felix. It's either statutory rape and or multiple wives, having multiple wives. We know that he had multiple wives, but her age of conception of Serenity was shocking to me, and it was shocking after the fact because that wasn't the person that I knew. Now, through the years, I think about this all the time. I wish Michelle would have been able to make her own choices and decisions in life. She was born into, this group that studied scripture, that lived very differently than the rest of the world. But Michelle was happy. And she had 2 other kids. She was alive. That was her family, was Mount Carmel.
Well,
and they wiped her out. They wiped those children out, and they gassed those children to death because they said David Koresh was bad. That's not a justification for killing them.
we were speaking before about putting things in context, and now you have to make sure it's in context. If you take this out of context, say the 14-year-old conceiving, that sounds bad.
Yeah.
But I'm 70, David, and I recall back into my early 20s even, some people I knew, some girls I knew that were 15 that got married because they had their parents' consent. That was the difference. If some guy had gone and had sex with him, it'd have been breaking the law. But if you ask the parents, can I marry her? And they give consent, then it's not against the law.
Sure.
I knew several. I went to high school with girls who got married when they were 15. Yeah.
And I think,
and not because they had to.
At the time, 14 was the law in Texas too.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Again, this speaks to the history of mankind and the history of America. How many kissing cousins, if you will, that ended up marrying and having families? In the past, it was when you
Franklin
you're
Roosevelt
ready to be married. There's several examples in history. It's
Roosevelt married his cousin. Yeah.
The thing to me is is it love or not? If it's love, then how are you going to go after an 18-year-old kid who's dating a 17-year-old girl? That's technically illegal in a lot of states, but they're age appropriate. And do they love each other? Is they using her? I mean, there should be other factors.
Right. Context.
Yeah. Context,
Put it in
exactly.
context. All right. You wrote this fabulous book. Was it hard? Was it hard to do?
Yeah.
Because you're having to pull up all these memories and all these emotionally charged memories, man.
It was very hard to do, but I needed to do it. It was cathartic. And, it was the closest thing I had to therapy at the time, for sure, was doing the book. Because there wasn't, it's not like we came out of Mount Carmel and everyone welcomed us and said, oh, can I help you? Let's give you some therapy. Let's,
Right.
No, it's like you're on your own, kid. Good luck.
Yeah.
So you're on your own with your anger and with, I remember when I first went back to Maine, I would hear a helicopter and I would open my eyes and wake up under the bed. And I wasn't sleeping. I'd be awake at the time, but I'd hear a helicopter and all of a sudden I'm under my bed. How the hell did I get there? I don't remember getting under my bed, but that's the reaction I had to the sound of a helicopter. Was it made me hide. And, it took a while to get used to the sound of a helicopter, for example. There are a lot of things that were shocking after Mount Carmel. I remember I went to LA after that experience, months after, and there's a billboard, and this huge billboard of this half-naked woman just in a bikini. And I was like, wow, there's Babylon. It's just shocking. Because I had been in this group for a couple of years where the women, everyone wore if you wore a shirt, it had to cover your behind, and everyone dressed extremely conservative. And I mean, I was raised a rocker. I love the miniskirt. I was down, but having gone through this experience, I saw things differently. Yeah, and the outside world was shocking for a time. I had to readjust for sure.
Yeah, I bet. How long did it take you to write this book?
6 months to a year.
Oh, that's quick.
Yeah.
That's quick for a book.
I had some good help. I had a co-writer, Leon Whiteson, who really did amazing work with me.
Now, did you find the co-writer, or did you have an agent to help you find the co-writer?
The funny thing is, I didn't know even where to begin with this. I knew I had written some things myself, but I knew that I had gotten so much evidence. Like if there was a paperwork from Amnesty International, I had it. I tried to get as much as I could. I had a chest filled with different papers, articles, newspaper articles, magazines, whatever. Collected everything I could on Waco. And I knew that going through all the research phase would have killed me going through all that. So I definitely needed someone with another perspective to help me. And Leon was particularly valuable when it came to facing the things that I didn't want to face. Talking about the young girls, the child abuse, all of that stuff, because we had to look at it clinically. I wanted to give my experience of what I saw as a person, but also there was an outside view that I don't think I would have been able to be objective. And the thing that was wonderful about my book is the fact that they wanted to pan me so bad. I remember Geraldo. I remember all these people when my book was coming out. They wanted to say it was a one-sided view from someone who was there, but they couldn't because it was written so objectively. And they actually had to say, surprisingly objective book from a survivor of Waco.
Wow.
That is because of Leon Whiteson. I could not have been able to do that with not even one-sidedness, but the lack of justice, the anger. When it's you against the world, you're put into a corner. That's what you see. Your view is you're fighting your way out of that corner, and that was my view. My view was what the government did, how they did it, how it affected me, all extremely important. But it was very hard for me to see anything from their perspective because they were just evil as far as I was concerned. They were just wrong in every way, and that's where the Leon was totally instrumental in bringing this about and making it that objective.
Probably helped you stay on schedule too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because I've been working on my own memoir for like 3 years now.
Yeah,
and I probably don't have 90 pages because I'll get 20 pages written, and it's such an emotional drain on me that I'll just not pick it back up for 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? When the book went from a place called Waco to Waco: A Survivor's Story, they made it, when it went to paperback, they changed the name because of the series. But I wrote the epilogue, and I did that myself. And it was amazing experience. I'm very proud of the epilogue. So it's like, I know I can do it. I know I can write. And
well, keep writing, David.
No, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But I think I needed that experience to realize that I think more does need to be written on the subject. I just want to make sure that I give credit where it's due. Leon died a couple of years ago of cancer, and God, he was just. I wish in his lifetime I would have acknowledged him more and just what he did in helping me bring my story out, and the way that it needed to be told to people.
Well, good for him,
Yeah,
Leon Whiteson.
Whiteson. Yeah.
Well, God bless Leon Whiteson for helping with this.
Great writer. Yeah.
Good.
Absolutely.
Tell me what it was like working on the movie.
That was an amazing experience.
How'd that come about?
I got a call. I was driving a cab at the time. So I had always played in a band after all of this, and that's the drumming live is what really helped me to kind of get through it all and work out all those like demons or whatever, the anger. I just tired myself out playing, so that got me through the week. And then the weekends I would do the same thing again. But I got a call from a guy named John Dowdle, and he's like, "Hey, Dave Thibodeau, I read your book, and I want to make a movie." I said, "Whatever."
Yeah.
I said, "Sure, dude."
Yeah.
And he goes, "No, really?" I go, "Yeah, a lot of people want to make a movie, and they've all been horrible. And so why would I think you'd be any better?" So can I come meet you? I said, "Okay." They came. Him and his brother Drew flew out, and we hung out for a bit. And what I was impressed with, now, he had read a lot of the books that I had read, and in talking to John, I felt a kindredship, and that was important. I wasn't going to do anything with anyone if I didn't have some kind of rapport. And over the years, I've learned to go with your gut. Now, in the past, I have taken option checks that have never been made into anything, and I was glad at the end of the day that they didn't, because damn, it would have been horrible.
Right.
So that you learn from experiences like that and say, no, it's got to be done right. So this guy, like, we shared a book in common, Donald Passman's Confessions of an Economic Hitman, which to this day is one of my just favorite books about how the world really works, and especially the CIA and what we do in third world countries and how we control and, set up a base here. We're going to build your infrastructure, but you're going to owe us. We're going to make sure that, that you're not using goats for your waste management, but you're going to owe us. And we're going to put a few thousand troops here, and there's nothing you can do. That's kind of how we do business in other countries. And this book really brought that out. It made a huge impression on me, as did Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent and other books that I felt just very important. History. I briefly just want to mention Howard Zinn. People's history is so powerful. And I think it's those books like that are the reasons that people are so conscious now about how things are really done. And for the first time, the average everyday person is having access to true history. And that's just an exciting time.
I agree.
Dangerous, exciting. And so what was my point? My point was we shared a lot of these books and a lot of these passions on things. And the thing that John always wanted to do was find stories that people think are one way, that are actually the other way, and then show that other side. And an example was that he used was the famous McDonald's coffee burning incident.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's a real thing. And that woman, she was made to be like shunned for showing, "Oh, your coffee was 200 burning." No, it was scalding hot coffee.
Yeah, she had to have a skin graft.
Yeah, she had a real issue there. But as you remember at the time, everyone was against her for filing that lawsuit. And it's so that's that kind of thing that John wanted to do. Now, John originally was researching what a Branch Davidian he wanted to use a Branch Davidian in a character for one of his stories that he was creating. The same guy that did the movies As Above, So Below, him and his brother, they did No Way Out with Pierce Brosnan and Owen Wilson. Yeah, he's a great filmmaker. But he had a character that was going to be a Davidian, so he read my book. And they said, "Oh my God, this is the story I got to make." And so I thought he was crazy. I thought it was never going to happen. But I went with it, and we talked, and then we decided, okay, we're going to try to move forward with it. Years later, it's a screenplay and outline. They get some interest. And instead of doing the book, I'm not going to mention the individual, but the producer that was working with us at the time said that we should probably make a series out of this. And so he'd never written a series. So then he had to, face his fears and start writing a series, and it turned into the 6-part series, The Event.
Good.
Yeah. And so because what happened, it came out on Paramount Networks, as we know, a couple years before COVID. And, a lot of people saw it, but not the Netflix type of audience. So what happened is it didn't go to Netflix. And I kept wondering, why isn't it on Netflix? When's it going to go to Netflix? And it just, there was some kind of legal issue. I don't want to even get into any of that. But what happened was it looks like it was saved for COVID.
Yeah.
Because as the month or two after COVID hit and people realized that many people couldn't work anymore, it was that whole thing where you had to be, an essential worker, right? I guess you guys joked on your podcast of being essential workers.
Yeah.
But most other people were forced to stay at home. And that's when it comes out on Netflix. So
More Divine Order.
Millions of people see it.
Yeah.
Something like 30 million saw the series. And Paramount Network said, wow, we got 30 million people saw this. Maybe you guys should figure out how to do a second season. And so I've been told recently that they're working on the second season, and what they want to do is focus on Vernon's life, becoming David, and then the trials after, and what happened, and the corruption of the criminal. I don't know if
they're going to do it like Star Wars. They're going to start in the middle and then go to the front and then go to the back.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's going to flash back and flash forward in this other season.
That works. How long was it from your initial call in the cab to the movie hitting TV and being released?
4 or 5 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's about what Netflix was with me.
Yeah.
I get the call. It's a guy named Taki Odom, who is one of the producers. And I was like you. I had heard it so many times. Yeah. I was so tired of telling the story. I go, yeah, whatever. Yeah, all right. No, I'm tired of educating everybody. You tell me you know what you're talking about. You show me you know what you're talking about, and then I'll talk to you. He goes, oh, I've already done my research. And we started talking. And he knew stuff I had forgotten. So I said, okay, I'll talk with you. And so he flew down. But it was still like 4.5 years from that visit to it get, wasn't it 4.5 years, Jonathan? Yeah, and Jonathan's in here with us too, by the way, for our audience. He's sitting behind the cameras today. And Jonathan is a great musician himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, he plays, I compare his playing to George Harrison and Clapton and those guys. I think he's just great.
We got slow hand over here.
Yeah. And he's got like 30 guitars. Yeah, he's really, really good. And he can play anything. What kind of music did David like?
David was, he did his own thing. What's, really interesting, and this is something I've talked with other musicians about, I think the most original musicians are those that just play their own music. And they try maybe not to be influenced so much by other people. I just love music. So there's no way that I could not be influenced by other people. Everything from Judas Priest to Bob Dylan and everything in between. I love, I can go from John Denver to listen to Blue October to Megadeth, Metallica, and then put on a Joni Mitchell album, and I'm just as happy as can be.
You'd say when you guys were playing at the Q Stick.
Yeah.
What kind of music did you play?
David's influences, when I was, with him, kind of the later phase there was Satriani and Vai. He was very much into the guitar, arpeggio, that kind of classical hard rock sound. He loved that. And so, that's it. I would lay down a beat, sometimes a double bass groove, and he would just do his thing over it.
Okay.
So yeah, David's process was interesting. We'd wake up in the morning, we'd have breakfast, we'd all go out to work, we'd break for lunch, we'd all go out and work again. We were building that building. And then after dinner, there'd be about an hour respite. And then all of a sudden, Dave would get on stage and start playing. That was my cue and Jamie's cue to go and jam. And it went from Jamie to Pablo. Pablo was used as a bass player with David. He chose the musicians as he felt at the time. But I was almost always the drummer, sometimes Michael Schroeder, but mostly me. And I would, we'd go to the stage and play for about an hour. And then we'd just jam for an hour. And then when the jamming ended is when people would start filing in for the Bible study. And almost every night there was a Bible study. Sometimes it would be an hour or two. Sometimes it would be 6. It just depended on what was happening with David and what he was seeing. A lot of times there wouldn't be much. And it was same studies over and over. But then every once in a while he'd get what he would call new light. And then he'd start teaching some different scripture that we weren't familiar with in a different book, and then he would equate it to all the other stuff, and you'd be like, where the hell do you get this information? And that's not just me. Steve Schneider often would say, where does he get this?
So it wasn't something you felt you had to endure, but it was something you enjoyed?
There were times where you felt like you had to endure.
Oh, okay. I was wondering about those 6-hour sermons. That'd be tough on me.
No, there were times it was an act of God. I stayed in for some of those studies because I was definitely a rambunctious youth. And there was times we'd go out for a break and I'd be kicking the dirt outside and Steve Steve would be laughing at me. Schneider would be laughing. And I'm like, what the hell are you laughing at? And he'd be like, oh, I've been there. I know what you're going through. We had like a lot of moments like that. But, generally it was fascinating. I mean, like I said, it had to be an act of God to keep my attention through a lot of that stuff. But I genuinely did find the book to be something I did not anticipate it would be, a direct opposite of what I anticipated it would be. And some of the things that made it so true and real is the fact that it's so dark. And there's just many aspects of the human condition that are all of it. It's all covered in there, for good or for bad. And, there's stories to this day that I am mad at God for, like the story of Job really, really eats at me. The fact that someone could love the Creator that much, do everything for him, and as a test, the Creator has a test with Satan to make this guy's life a living hell, just to prove that he will not denounce God.
Though he slay me, yet will I trust him. That's what Job said.
Yeah, it's an amazing. It makes me angry though.
I'm an ordained Baptist preacher, by the way. I know this stuff backwards and forwards. Yeah.
But so a lot of these things I find very just infuriating, if you will. But at the end of the day, I saw something I can't describe, Vic. The easiest thing I could do for my life, and really it would make my life so much better if I would just say, you know what, David was just a con man, and just agree with the FBI and say, but he wasn't. The guy, like him, hate him, whatever, he lived for God. Mm-hmm. That was not a con. That was a 24/7 thing that I witnessed day in and day out. Okay, anything he did it because he believed it was in the scripture or was told to him to do. Every meal, not eating pork. He would just, everything was about God. He would take a trip and it was like, what does God want me to do on this trip? He would deal with a person who maybe was having a problem. Somebody met at a bar. What does God want me to do with him? How can I help this person? Like, he was always thinking about how would God want me to handle this situation. In fact, I never saw anyone that directed almost every minute of their life to God. That's one of the things that people don't know about David that for me is incredibly impressive to this day. I've never seen anyone live that way. And he did. He really did.
That is impressive.
Well, it's what it is. It's true. So, people will be debating forever what aspects he used for his own good or his own betterment, and what aspects that, to me, it just seemed like everything he did was for the Father. But like I said, it would be, if I could just say, none of this is true, the book isn't true, I'd just be an atheist. There was aspects of that would be easier than to have to deal with the derision you get and with the things that come with faith.
I understand.
I'm sure you do. I think anyone of faith does. But at the end of the day, you are what you are, and you love what you love, and God is either real or she isn't. And to me, he's always been real. It's always been there. There's always been something behind the scenes that I could sense taking place that I had no control of. I don't know if we talked about this earlier in the podcast or at lunch, but when I put all my effort into something, it tends to fail. A lot of people, no, they're successful. They put their effort into it and it blossoms. Not me. The things that I get come to me because it's a need and not a want. And there's definitely a divine thing that has been behind every step of my life.
That's faith in divine order.
Yeah.
It is.
That I can't deny, so.
Hi, I'm Vic Feazell. During these trying times, you might want to just stay home. And at the law offices of Vic Feazell, we understand.
That's why we're set up to handle your personal injury claim without you even having to come in. Just give us a call, and we'll take it from there. We can send any paperwork straight to your smartphone or computer. Don't delay, because if we don't put money in your pocket, you don't owe us anything. I'm Vic Feazell.